What if I told you that right now, at this very moment, a storm is brewing in Africa that could shake the entire world order to its core? What if I told you that one young leader in West Africa has ignited a fire so powerful that even the most dominant global empires are scrambling to extinguish it before it becomes a wildfire? And what if I told you that this very man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, has just been warned by one of Africa's greatest thinkers, Professor PLO Lumumba, with words so chilling, so prophetic, that they sent shockwaves through every corridor of power? They will come for you. Not if, but when. And they are already coming. This is not just a story. It is a warning, a revelation, and a declaration of war on the chains that have held Africa back for generations. Stay with me to the end. Because what you're about to hear, they do not want you to know. Burkina Faso, a nation once exploited, suppressed, and forgotten by the world's superpowers. But in 2022, the tides turned. A 34-year-old army captain rose from the ashes of despair and corruption and declared something unthinkable. Burkina Faso belongs to its people. Not to France. Not to the IMF. Not to the West. That man, Ibrahim Traoré, did what most African leaders have feared to do for decades. He expelled foreign troops. He terminated exploitative mining deals. He aligned with fellow Pan-African states. He chose the people over the puppeteers. And with every bold move, a quiet but powerful question began to grow across the continent. Is this the man who will complete what Sankara started? But power never changes without pain. And change never comes without enemies. Traoré's actions did not go unnoticed. Behind closed doors in Washington, Paris, and Brussels, concern turned to fear. Fear turned to strategy. And strategy turned to sabotage. And then came the whisper in the wind. A voice. A warning. From one of the sharpest minds Africa has ever known. Professor PLO Lumumba. The two met privately. Away from the cameras. Away from the noise. But what was shared in that room cannot remain hidden. Paul Lumumba looked into the eyes of Ibrahim Traoré and said one sentence that shook the air. They will come for you. And then he explained. The warning. Ibrahim, they will not send armies. They will send economists, diplomats, journalists, NGOs, preachers, and poison promises. They will not shoot you. They will seduce you. And if they cannot buy you, they will bury you. Lumumba knew. He had seen it before. He had seen what they did to Patrice Lumumba in Congo. He had seen what they did to Thomas Sankara, right there in Burkina Faso. He had seen what they did to Kwame Nkrumah, Amilcar Cabral, Muammar Gaddafi. And now, he saw what they were preparing for Traoré. The truth they don't want you to hear. They will call him a tyrant. They will accuse him of silencing democracy. They will starve the nation economically. They will fund internal rebellion. They will corrupt his inner circle. And they will plot to eliminate him, all while claiming to protect freedom. For what? Because Ibrahim Traoré is dangerous. Not because he has weapons. Not because he has power. But because he has an idea. An idea that Africa must stand alone. An idea that the era of neocolonialism must end. An idea that our resources, our dignity, our freedom, must never be for sale again. And when one African rises with that kind of conviction, the empires begin to tremble. Because ideas cannot be killed. They multiply. From Mali to Guinea, from Niger to Chad, millions of young Africans now look to Traoré as a symbol of something greater. A symbol of what could be. A symbol of a new Africa, bold, sovereign, and unafraid. And they are watching. Watching to see whether he will rise, or be crushed like the heroes before him. And this is why Lumumba's warning was not just to Traoré, it was to all of us. When one African leader chooses freedom, they will come for him. But if millions stand with him, they cannot stop us all. Ibrahim Traoré looked back at Professor Lumumba. His face was calm, his voice steady, and he replied, "Let them come. I am not afraid of death. I am afraid of silence. If I fall, I will fall standing, and my fall will awaken 10,000 more." This is not just about Traoré. This is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about the future of a continent. This is about you, about us, about Africa. And so, to the world we say, you may come for one of us, but you cannot silence all of us. Africa is no longer sleeping. Africa is rising. The aftershock. But what happened after Lumumba's warning? What did Ibrahim Traoré do next? He returned to Burkina Faso with a deeper fire in his heart. He didn't just hear PLO Lumumba's words, he embodied them. In the weeks that followed, Traoré began to move differently. His speeches became sharper. His vision became bolder. He started restructuring the entire defense system of the country, not just with weapons, but with ideology. He knew the real war would not be fought only with bullets, but with beliefs. And then, the shadows began to move. A sudden spike in Western-funded NGOs began monitoring human rights. New opposition voices, never before active, began loudly denouncing his reforms. International media outlets started publishing hit pieces, labeling him authoritarian, dangerous, unstable. Economic aid was suspended. Sanctions were whispered. And in the heart of the capital, a confidential document was leaked, one that hinted at plans to divide the armed forces, fund dissent, and push the country into internal chaos. A document allegedly circulated through foreign embassies. It had begun. Just as Lumumba said, they were coming. But Traoré was not caught off guard. He gathered his inner circle, not of businessmen or foreign-trained diplomats, but veterans, scholars, farmers, and young students. People with calloused hands and clean hearts. People who understood the soul of the nation. And to them he said, they will not fight us in the fields. They will fight us in the mind. In the media. In our economy. In our sleep. But this time, we fight back, not with hatred, but with truth. Not with fear, but with fire. And so, a new campaign began. Nationwide education programs teaching the people about neocolonialism, sovereignty, and economic independence. Military training not just for soldiers, but for civilians, men and women alike, arming them with self-reliance. New media platforms, African-owned, speaking truth without filters or foreign influence. And perhaps most importantly, a regional alliance quietly forming with Mali, Niger, and Guinea, known now as the Pan-African Shield. The sleeping giant stirs. The world barely noticed it, but something had shifted. Burkina Faso was no longer just defending itself. It was becoming a symbol, a blueprint, a revolution. And the people felt it. In the markets, in the villages, in the universities, young Africans began walking with a new posture, a new pride, a new purpose. For the first time in decades, they weren't waiting for Western saviors. They were building their own future, brick by brick. But with that hope came danger. An attempted military coup was foiled. 2 generals arrested. Foreign funds traced back to suspicious accounts. And yet, Traoré remained calm. I was not crowned by corporations. I was chosen by a cry from the soul of Africa. And I will answer it, with or without allies, with or without life. The return of the hyenas. As Burkina Faso became more self-sufficient, the foreign powers became more desperate. One by one, diplomats arrived with proposals, promises of aid, technology, defense support. But every offer came with invisible chains. And every time Traoré said, no, he was no longer playing their game. He was building his own board. And on that board, Africa was not a pawn, it was the king. And so, the whispers grew louder. Black ops, assassination plots, psychological warfare, cyber attacks. But still, he did not blink. Because now, Traoré was no longer standing alone. Across Africa, students were chanting his name. Writers were quoting his speeches. Rappers were turning his voice into resistance anthems. Elders were calling him the son of Sankara. And in the corridors of global power, a terrifying realization dawned. They had made a martyr before he even died. This is not the end. This is just the beginning. The fire is lit. The lion is awake. And this time, Africa is not backing down. The trap has been set, the final battle for Africa begins. They tried everything. They couldn't bribe him. They couldn't break him. They couldn't bury him in lies. So now, they've changed tactics. Ibrahim Traoré has entered the most dangerous phase of any revolutionary's life. The silent war. No bombs. No gunfire. No invasions. Just whispers in the dark. Sudden disappearances. And smiles that conceal sharp daggers. And yet he stands. But what the world doesn't know is this. The trap has already been set. The turning point. It started quietly. One of Traoré's top aides, a man he'd known for years, suddenly took a private trip to a foreign capital. No one questioned it. He returned with gifts, smiles, and glowing promises from unnamed friends. Within a week, one of Burkina Faso's key military bases reported communication failure. 2 days later, armed rebels launched an ambush near the border. Coincidence? It was the beginning of a calculated, multi-layered takedown. A soft coup. Engineered not from within Ouagadougou, but from polished offices in Europe and silent halls in Washington. But this time, they underestimated one thing. Traoré had seen it coming. The counterstrike. Long before the snakes began to slither in, Traoré had already begun cleaning the den. Not with noise, but with precision. He planted decoys. He fed false intelligence. He tracked every phone, every contact, every suspicious handshake. And when the betrayal unfolded, he struck first. 6 high-ranking officials were arrested before dawn. 2 planes, one carrying foreign diplomats, were denied airspace and turned back. A bank account, traced to an offshore shell company, was frozen with millions of euros marked for media development. The enemy was caught mid-step. But it was only a warning. Because Traoré knew this wasn't just about Burkina Faso anymore. The sleeping giant has awakened. In Mali, the people flooded the streets in solidarity. In Niger, students renamed campuses after Traoré. In Congo, murals of Sankara and Traoré began appearing overnight, painted in blood red and gold. The empire was bleeding control. And it panicked. Suddenly, international headlines shifted overnight. Burkina Faso sliding into dictatorship. Democracy under threat in West Africa. Time for international intervention? Traoré laughed. You were silent when our children died from hunger. You were silent when our gold was stolen. You were silent when our presidents were puppets. But now, when we choose dignity, you scream. He was no longer addressing presidents. He was addressing history. And the battle line had been drawn. Africa's final war will not be fought in trenches. It will be fought in minds, in media, and in the hearts of the people. The message from Lumumba, again. And then, just when the flames began rising, a voice returned. PLO Lumumba. He spoke not in fear, but in fire. This is the hour of decision. They will try to break him not with death, but with dishonor. They will send traitors with familiar faces. They will not shoot. They will frame. And when that fails, they will fabricate. But remember, Africa, the chains have changed shape. But they are still chains. To the youth, now is your moment. Do not wait for heroes, become them. Because if Traoré falls alone, Africa will bleed again. But if he stands with millions behind him, Africa will never kneel again. Shadows and storms. Traoré now lives with a price on his head. His food is tested. His guards are rotated every 72 hours. His convoy routes are changed at the last minute. Because the next bullet will not be fired by an enemy, it will come from someone who once called him brother. But still, he shows no fear. In his last closed-door meeting with his regional allies, he stood, looked each of them in the eye, and said, "If I disappear tomorrow, let my blood be the seed of African resistance. But while I breathe, I will walk into the storm. Not for glory, not for power, but so that a child born tomorrow in Ouagadougou will never again call France mother." This is not a documentary. This is not a history lesson. This is now. As you listen to these words, agents are plotting. Plans are unfolding. Money is changing hands. But so is hope. So is resistance. So is unity. Traoré is not a saint. He's not a god. He's a man. But in a world ruled by cowards and compromised puppets, one brave man is enough to start an earthquake. And the ground beneath the empire is cracking. This is not over. This is the beginning of the final chapter. And whether Ibrahim Traoré lives or dies, his fire is now in us all.